Alien Mockery ended when they realized our shots weren't meant for the target. Part 1, The Laughingstock. The Galactic Combat Assessment happened once every 50 cycles. It was the most important military event in the known universe. Species from 100 different star systems gathered at the neutral station called the Proving Ground. They came to show their weapons, their tactics, and their warriors. They came to prove their worth. This cycle was different. This cycle, humanity had been invited for the first time. Colonel Sarah stood at the viewing window of the human delegation's quarters. She watched the ships arrive from distant stars. Some were sleek and silver, others bristled with weapons. A few moved in ways that hurt the eyes to follow. Each one carried warriors who had trained their whole lives for this moment. Behind her, Sergeant checked their equipment for the 10th time that morning. Their team was small. Just 12 soldiers, 3 officers, and a handful of support staff. Compared to the delegations of other species, they looked almost sad. "They have arrived," said. He nodded toward a ship that looked like a crystal knife cutting through space. "They're the ones to beat, perfect accuracy, never miss a shot." Had read the files. They were in species with compound eyes that could track a dust particle across a kilometer. Their warriors trained from birth. Their weapons were works of art. In 10,000 years of recorded history, no marksman had ever missed a target in competition. "We're not here to beat them," said quietly. Raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He had served with the colonel long enough to know when to keep quiet. The opening ceremony filled the main hall of the station. Hundreds of species gathered under lights that shifted to accommodate different visual spectrums, watched the crowd with interest. There were the massive reptilian warriors who believed in honor above all else. There were the delicate with wings like stained glass who served as neutral observers. There were dozens of others, each with their own strengths, their own histories, their own ways of war. And then there were the humans, small, soft, new. The ambassador was easy to spot, tall and angular, with mandibles that clicked when he spoke. His name was L, and he had won the assessment 3 times in his youth. Now he served as his species representative, and he looked at the human delegation the way a cat might look at a mouse. "Curious," L said, his translator turning his clicks into words. "The council has invited primitives to witness our display." Smiled politely. "We're here to participate, Ambassador, not just watch." The silence that followed was heavy. Then El made a sound that his translator rendered as laughter. Other aliens nearby joined in. The sound of their amusement filled the hall like strange music. "Participate," El repeated. "How delightful. I look forward to seeing what your species can do." The first day of competition was precision shooting. It was considered the test of a warrior's skill. A clean shot at a clean target. No tricks, no complications, just aim and fire. They went first. Their shooters moved like machines. Each one stepped to the line, raised their weapon, and fired. Each shot hit the center of the target, perfect scores one after another. The crowd watched in respectful silence. This was mastery. This was what 10,000 years of tradition looked like. Then came the humans. Corporal James took his position at the firing line. He was young, barely 25, but he had been chosen for a reason. He raised his rifle, took a breath, and fired. The shot went wide, not by much but enough. It struck the outer ring of the target instead of the center. Whispers rippled through the crowd. El's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. James fired again. This time the shot landed even further from center. It barely clipped the edge of the target. The whispers grew louder. Someone laughed. It was not a kind sound. One by one, the human shooters took their turns. One by one, they missed. Not by catastrophic margins, but consistently off-center. Their shots landed in scattered patterns around the bullseyes, never quite hitting the mark. By the time the last shooter finished, the human accuracy scores were the lowest ever recorded in the history of the assessment. The laughter was open now. Elle approached Colonel with a look that might have been pity on a face designed to show emotion. "Perhaps," he said, "your species should focus on other pursuits. Farming, perhaps, or art, something that doesn't require precision." His face remained calm. "We're not finished yet, Ambassador." "No, I suppose you're not." Elle's mandibles spread in what passed for a smile. "I look forward to seeing what other demonstrations of incompetence you have prepared." The second demonstration was squad-level exercises. Teams of soldiers would move through a simulated environment, engaging holographic enemies while observers scored their tactics and effectiveness. Again, they excelled. Their squads moved with perfect coordination. Their shots were precise. Their formations were textbook. They completed the exercise with a near-perfect score. The humans took the field next. What followed was, by any reasonable measure, chaos. Their formation seemed random. Soldiers would suddenly break from their positions to fire at empty walls. Suppressing fire went in directions where no enemy stood. Grenades were thrown at patches of floor that appeared completely empty. One soldier fired an entire magazine at a structural support pillar that had no tactical value whatsoever. The observers watched in confusion. They watched in open contempt. A general leaned toward his aide and spoke loudly enough for nearby delegations to hear. "I move that humans be classified as a non-combatant species," he rumbled. "For their own protection, clearly. They are no more warriors than the grass that grows in fields." Laughter echoed through the observation deck. Even species that had remained neutral now joined in the mockery. The humans had become the joke of the assessment, a footnote, a curiosity brought in to provide entertainment for the real warriors. Through it all, Colonel said nothing. She simply watched her soldiers complete their exercises. When they finished and rejoined the delegation, she nodded to them once. That was all. Sergeant approached her as the alien delegations filed out, still chuckling among themselves. "They think we're fools," he said quietly. "Let them," replied Colonel with respect. "The assessment isn't over, Sergeant." Eyes were fixed on something far away. "We've requested that the human demonstration be allowed to continue to its conclusion, all 3 phases." Frowned and they agreed. They found it amusing to do so. A small smile crossed his face. "They want to see how much worse it can get." "And can it get worse, I mean?" Turned to look at him. There was something in her eyes that made stand a little despite himself. "No," she said. "It's about to get very, very different." Part 2, The Doctrine. The second phase of the Galactic Combat Assessment was the simulation trials. Each species would send teams through a holographic combat scenario, facing AI-controlled enemies in a controlled environment. Points were awarded for objectives completed, enemies eliminated, and tactical efficiency. It was meant to show how a species actually fought, not just how well they could shoot at circles. They performed flawlessly, as expected. Their teams moved through the simulation like water flowing downhill. Every shot landed. Every movement was precise. They completed the scenario in record time with 0 casualties and a perfect score. The observation deck filled with murmurs of approval. Elle stood tall, accepting the admiration of lesser species with practiced grace. Then it was humanity's turn. Alpha Squad entered the simulation arena. The scenario was a standard urban combat environment, destroyed buildings, scattered cover, and enemy positions throughout. Holographic soldiers would appear, engage, and be scored based on whether they were eliminated and how. From the first moment, the humans seemed to be failing. Private Tours fired at a wall. The shot hit several feet from the nearest enemy position. The aliens watching made notes on their scoring devices, marking the miss. Corporal threw a grenade at an empty corner of the arena. It exploded against bare concrete with no enemies nearby. More notes, more poor scores. Sergeant fired a burst at the floor, then at a window frame. then at what appeared to be a perfectly ordinary support beam. Not one of his shots came close to a holographic enemy. "This is painful to watch," a observer rumbled. "End their suffering, terminate the scenario." "Not yet," said a soft voice. It came from a young standing near the back of the observation deck. Her name was, and she was a tactical analyst, not a warrior. She had been brought along to study enemy strategies, and she was studying the humans with intense focus. "Something is strange here." "Strange," Elle clicked dismissively. "They are incompetent. There is nothing strange about failure." "No, Ambassador, watch." Pointed at the arena display. The human squad had just completed their first objective. The observation deck went quiet. "They haven't hit a single enemy," someone said. "And yet the enemies are eliminated," replied. It was true. Looking at the scenario readout, the holographic enemies in the first section had all been marked as neutralized, but the human accuracy scores showed nothing but misses. "Equipment malfunction," Elle decided. "Their weapons are faulty." But was already pulling up the replay footage. She watched Private Torres fire at the wall. The shot hit concrete and a chunk of debris flew backward. The debris struck a holographic soldier who had been taking cover behind a barrier. Kill confirmed. She watched Corporal's grenade. It didn't hit any enemies directly, but it did hit a load-bearing section of a damaged pillar. The pillar collapsed. The ceiling came down. 3 holographic enemies were buried under simulated rubble. She watched Sergeant fire at the floor. The shots punctured a gas line running beneath the surface. The gas ignited when an enemy soldier fired his weapon. The resulting explosion took out an entire enemy position. "Ancestors preserve us," whispered. The simulation continued. The humans advanced through the scenario with their seemingly random tactics. They fired at walls, floors, and ceilings. They threw grenades at empty corners. They shot at pipes, cables, and structural elements. Not once did they aim directly at an enemy. And not once did an enemy survive their passing. In one section, a human sniper took position on a ruined rooftop. There was an enemy commander hiding behind total cover, 3 walls of solid concrete with no line of sight from any angle. Impossible to hit. The sniper aimed somewhere else entirely and fired a single round. The round hit a metal pipe. It bounced. It hit a reflective surface on a destroyed vehicle. It bounced again. It passed through a gap in a ventilation duct. And then it emerged behind the commander's cover and struck him in the back of the head. The observation deck was silent now. Began running calculations. She mapped every shot the humans had fired. She traced every ricochet, every collapse, every secondary effect. The pattern that emerged made her compound eyes widen in something that, on a might have been fear. Every shot had been precisely placed, not to hit the target but to create a chain of events that would. The humans weren't missing. They had never been missing. They were hitting exactly what they aimed at. They just weren't aiming at the obvious targets. Rushed to Ambassador L with her findings. She thrust the data into his hands, her words coming fast. "Ambassador, you need to see this. The humans, they're not incompetent. They're using a combat doctrine unlike anything in our records. Every shot is calculated to." L dismissed her with a wave of his upper limb. "Calm yourself, analyst. What you're describing is impossible. Accuracy is accuracy. A shot that misses the target has missed the target. Mathematics does not change to accommodate primitive species." "But Ambassador..." "Enough." His mandibles clicked sharply. "Return to your station. I will not have my staff spreading wild theories about these primitives. They are having a run of luck, nothing more." Fell silent, but she kept watching, and she kept recording. Meanwhile, on the observation deck's lower level, an observer approached Colonel. There were neutral parties, forbidden from participating in combat assessments, but renowned for their curiosity and their wisdom. This one was old, with wings that had faded from bright colors to gentle pastels. "Colonel," the said, her voice like wind through bells. "I am observer. I have watched many assessments. I have seen many strange things. But I confess, I do not understand what I am seeing today." Inclined her head respectfully. "What would you like to understand, observer?" "Your soldiers. They do not fight as other species fight. They do not aim as other species aim. What doctrine are they following?" For the first time since the assessment began, Colonel smiled. It was a real smile, not the polite mask she had worn while absorbing alien mockery. "On Earth," she said, "our ancestors were not the fastest creatures, not the strongest, not the ones with the sharpest claws or the keenest eyes. We couldn't outrun our prey. We couldn't overpower our predators, and we certainly couldn't outshoot them." His antennae tilted forward with interest. "And yet your species survived." "We did more than survive." Turned to look at the display where her soldiers were completing another objective. "We learned to make the world itself fight for us. The arrow that misses the deer but startles it into running off a cliff. The stone that misses the lion but starts a rock slide. The fire that doesn't burn the mammoth but drives it into a pit we dug the night before. You hunt by changing the environment. We hunt by understanding the environment." His voice was soft but certain. "Every bullet we fire is a question asked of the world around us. What will break? What will move? What will change? The target is never just the enemy. The target is the chain of consequences that will reach the enemy." Was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice held something like wonder. "You do not shoot at where the enemy is." "No." Watched as Sergeant fired a round at a water pipe, and the resulting flood short-circuited an enemy defensive position. "We shoot at possibilities." The simulation ended. The human squad had completed every objective with 0 casualties. Their accuracy scores were still the lowest on record, and their kill count was higher than any other species in that scenario. The observation deck buzzed with confused discussion. Species who had been laughing hours ago now exchanged uncertain glances. What they had witnessed didn't fit into their understanding of combat. It was like watching someone win a race by walking sideways. El stood rigid, his mandibles pressed together tightly. His earlier mockery had dried up. He didn't understand what had happened, and he didn't like not understanding. "Luck," he said loudly to the observers around him. "Random chance. The scenario's programming must be flawed." But even as he said it, his report was beginning to circulate. The junior analyst had sent her findings to academic channels, to military theorists, to anyone who would listen. The numbers were undeniable. The geometry was perfect. Every human miss had been a precisely calculated shot with a dozen variables accounted for. The humans weren't inaccurate. They were so accurate that the concept of accuracy didn't apply to them anymore. They didn't need to hit targets. They needed to hit the universe in just the right spot to make targets cease to exist. As the second day ended, Colonel addressed her team. "Tomorrow is the final phase," she said. "Live fire exercise against combat drones." Sergeant nodded. "They'll expect us to keep playing dumb. They'll expect many things." Eyes were distant again, seeing patterns and possibilities that others might miss. "Tomorrow, we stop giving them what they expect. Tomorrow, we show them what humans really are." "And what are we, Colonel?" Smiled that small, knowing smile. "We are the species that looked at a hostile universe and said, 'Fine. If we can't beat you directly, we'll make you beat yourself.'" Part 3: The Demonstration. The final day of the Galactic Combat Assessment arrived with a tension that hadn't existed before. The live fire exercise was always the most spectacular event. Real weapons, real drones, real danger. It was where species proved their worth in the most direct way possible. The arena had been prepared overnight. It was a massive enclosed space filled with obstacles, platforms, and terrain features. Decommissioned combat drones waited in their charging stations, their weapons loaded with live ammunition. They were old models but still deadly. Every assessment had at least a few injuries. Occasionally, there were deaths. They went first, as they always did. Ambassador L himself led the demonstration team. He was old for a warrior, but his accuracy remained perfect. His team deployed in the arena with practiced precision. When the drones activated, 20 of them sweeping in with weapons hot, they responded with mechanical grace. Each shot found its mark. Drones fell from the air in neat patterns. Not a single round was wasted. The exercise lasted exactly 4 minutes and 12 seconds. 20 drones destroyed. 0 injuries. Perfect accuracy across 347 shots. The observation deck erupted in approval. This was mastery. This was what the galaxy's premier warriors looked like. L returned to the observation level and accepted congratulations from a dozen species. His mandibles spread wide in satisfaction. "That is how combat is done," he said loudly, making sure the human delegation could hear. "Perhaps our friends from Earth will take notes." Colonel said nothing. She simply nodded to her team. The humans took the field. There was a ripple of surprise when the drone count was announced. 50 combat units, more than twice what they had faced. They gave them a handicap, a general observed with what might have been pity. More drones means more targets. They're trying to help the humans score at least some hits. "That's not a handicap," said quietly. She had positioned herself near the front of the observation deck, her recording devices focused on the arena. "That's a death sentence. 50 drones would overwhelm most species." "Then they will die with honor," they rumbled. "More than they deserve, perhaps." In the arena, the human squad spread out. Their formation looked loose, almost casual. Sergeant checked his weapon one final time. The other soldiers found their positions among the obstacles and terrain features. The activation signal sounded. 50 combat drones powered up simultaneously. Their sensors came online. Their weapons charged. They rose from their platforms and swept toward the human positions in a deadly swarm. The humans opened fire. None of their shots went near the drones. Private Tours fired at a power conduit on the far wall. The conduit sparked and died, taking an entire section of the arena's lighting grid with it. Corporal James shot out a coolant pipe near the ceiling. A spray of supercooled gas began to fill the upper third of the arena. Sergeant put 3 rounds into what appeared to be a random section of floor plating. The shots punctured a maintenance access panel and severed something underneath. "What are they doing?" someone asked on the observation deck. "Dying," Al said with satisfaction, slowly and stupidly, but was watching the arena system readouts. Her compound eyes widened. "No," she breathed, "they're not dying, they're hunting." The first effects became visible. The drones relied on the station's targeting network to coordinate their movements and identify threats. When shots severed the network relay beneath the floor, the drones lost their shared awareness. They could still see, still shoot, but they could no longer act as one. 50 individual units became 50 individual problems. Then the coolant gas reached them. Combat drones were designed to operate in extreme conditions. They could handle vacuum, radiation, and temperatures that would kill organic beings. But their designers had optimized for the most common threats. No one had thought to protect against a sudden, localized drop in temperature of over 200 degrees. The gas didn't destroy the drones, it slowed them. Their actuators stiffened. Their reaction times doubled, then tripled. Movements that should have been instant became sluggish. The humans kept firing. Each shot hit something that wasn't a drone, and each impact set off a chain of consequences. A round struck a support strut. The strut buckled, and a section of overhead scaffolding came crashing down, crushing 3 drones beneath it. Another shot hit a fuel cell for the arena's portable equipment. The explosion took out 5 more drones and damaged several others. A grenade landed near what appeared to be empty floor space. When it detonated, the vibration triggered a cascade failure in a stack of equipment containers. The containers toppled like dominoes, driving 7 drones into a wall with enough force to destroy them. The observation deck had gone completely silent. 20 drones remained. They were disoriented, chilled, and operating without coordination. Their programming still drove them toward the human positions, but they were no longer a swarm. They were prey. Corporal fired a single shot at an emergency bulkhead control. The bulkhead slammed shut, cutting the arena in half and separating 15 of the remaining drones from the humans entirely. Those drones began searching for alternate routes, their sensors struggling to adapt to the changing environment. The 5 drones on the human side of the bulkhead pushed forward. They were the last immediate threats. Private Tors looked at them for a long moment. Then she fired at the ceiling. Her shot hit a sprinkler system. Water began to pour down over the advancing drones. Just water. It shouldn't have mattered. But the drones were already cold from the coolant gas. The water froze on contact with their chilled surfaces. Ice formed on their joints, their sensors, their weapon ports. In seconds, they were encased in a thin shell of frost that grew thicker with each passing moment. The 5 drones froze solid and crashed to the ground, their momentum carrying them forward until they shattered against the arena floor. On the other side of the bulkhead, the remaining 15 drones finally found an alternate route. They came around a corner in tight formation, weapons raised, ready to overwhelm the human position. Colonel was waiting for them. She had one rifle. She fired once. The shot didn't hit any drone. It hit a cable running along the wall. The cable controlled a magnetic crane, part of the arena's maintenance equipment. When the cable was severed, the crane lost power. It had been holding a ton of metal debris from previous assessments, suspended 30 feet above the corridor. The debris fell. 15 drones ceased to exist. The exercise timer showed 2 minutes and 43 seconds. 50 combat drones destroyed, 0 human casualties, 0 direct hits on any drone. The observation deck remained silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the translators had stopped clicking and buzzing, leaving an emptiness that pressed against the walls. El stood frozen, his mandibles pressed together so tightly that they might have cracked. What he had witnessed didn't fit into his understanding of combat. The had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of hitting what they aimed at, and in less than 3 minutes, the humans had shown that hitting the target was irrelevant. His report began to circulate through the gathered delegations. Her analysis laid it out in numbers that couldn't be argued with. The humans hadn't missed a single shot. Every round, every grenade, every action had been precisely calculated to achieve a specific result. They had treated the entire arena as a single connected system, and they had found the exact points of pressure needed to make that system destroy itself. The humans hadn't fought the drones. They had fought the universe, and they had made the universe fight the drones for them. Colonel emerged from the arena and walked to the center of the observation deck. Her uniform was slightly dusty, but she moved with the same calm confidence she had shown from the beginning. "Honored species of the Galactic Council," she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. "I believe there may have been some misunderstanding about human combat doctrine. Allow me to clarify." She clasped her hands behind her back and looked out at the assembled aliens. Humanity evolved as persistence predators on a world that wanted us dead. We were not the fastest, the strongest, or the most accurate creatures on our planet. Everything else was better at everything than we were, so we learned to stop trying to be better. A murmur rippled through the crowd, but continued. "We learned that accuracy doesn't matter if you can make the ground swallow your enemy. Speed doesn't matter if your enemy runs itself off a cliff. Strength doesn't matter if your enemy's own weight crushes it. We looked at a universe that was hostile in every way, and we asked ourselves, how do we make the universe fight on our side? She gestured toward the arena, where maintenance crews were beginning to clean up the debris. Every shot we fire is a question asked of the environment. What breaks? What moves? What changes? And when we find the answers, we don't shoot at enemies. We shoot at possibilities. We shoot at futures where our enemies no longer exist. Observer moved forward from the neutral section. Her wings caught the light as she approached. "Colonel," she said softly, "in my long life I have seen many species demonstrate many philosophies of combat, but I have never seen anything like this. Your people do not fight against the battlefield. You fight with it." "Yes," nodded. "Where other species see obstacles, we see tools. Where others see chaos, we see opportunity. We learned long ago that we don't have to hit what we're aiming at as long as what we're aiming at hits them." The silence stretched on. Then slowly, a sound began to build. It wasn't laughter this time. It was something else. The general was striking his fist against his chest, the highest form of respect his species could offer a warrior. They were humming in a frequency that indicated profound admiration. Other species joined in with their own gestures of acknowledgement. El stood apart from the rising approval. His posture was rigid, his mandibles still pressed tight. For the first time in his long career, he had been outmaneuvered, not outshot, not outfought. He had been made to look at combat itself and realize he had understood only a fraction of what it could be. Approached him carefully. "Ambassador, my analysis is complete, I believe." "I have seen the analysis." His voice was flat. "I understand it." "Then you understand that humanity represents a paradigm of combat we have no defense against. Every environment becomes their weapon. Every battlefield favors them. They could fight us on our own, and they would turn our own structures against us." El was silent for a long moment. Then his mandibles slowly relaxed. "Arrange a meeting with Colonel," he said quietly. "Private, no other delegations." "For what purpose, Ambassador?" His compound eyes fixed on the human commander, who was now surrounded by curious observers from a dozen species. "I wish to discuss an alliance." In the weeks that followed, the results of the Galactic Combat Assessment spread across the known universe. Humanity's threat assessment was quietly upgraded by several orders of magnitude. Diplomatic requests flooded in from species who had barely acknowledged Earth's existence before. Military theorists began studying human history, trying to understand how a species of soft, slow, weak creatures had conquered their own planet. Colonel gave a final interview before the human delegation departed the proving ground. The journalist was now promoted to cultural liaison based on her work during the assessment. "One final question," Colonel said. "What would you say to species who now fear humanity, who see your kind as dangerous?" Considered the question carefully. "I would say that we are exactly as dangerous as our friends need us to be, and exactly as creative as our enemies force us to be." She paused, and that small smile returned to her face. "We spent millions of years learning to survive in a universe that didn't want us. We got very good at it, but we'd rather make friends than enemies. Friends, after all, are another resource, another connection, another part of the universe we can work with instead of against. And if someone chooses to be an enemy, then they should remember what we showed them here." Eyes hardened just slightly. "We don't need to hit you to end you. We just need to find the right pressure point, pull the right thread, tip the right domino. You can hide behind any wall you want. We'll just make the wall fall on you." The human delegation departed the proving ground with full military honors, a courtesy extended only to species deemed worthy of respect. As their ship pulled away from the station, Sergeant stood beside Colonel at the viewport. "They stopped laughing," he observed. "They did. Think they understand now what we are." Watched the stars wheel past as the ship turned toward home. Somewhere out there, 100 species were reconsidering everything they thought they knew about the small, soft newcomers from an unremarkable planet. "They understand enough," she said. They understand that we're not a species that fights the universe. We're a species that makes the universe fight for us. And that's what makes us dangerous. No, Sergeant smiled, and there was something ancient in that smile, something that remembered mammoth hunts and siege warfare and 1,000 generations of turning weakness into strength. That's what makes us human. The ship jumped to faster-than-light speed, carrying its message home. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and the universe would never look at a missed shot the same way again. The end.